Hello, this is a recap of the first few minutes of class on week 2, January 11th. A few of you were out for swimming. Somebody was lucky enough to be in Switzerland, and I think there was an absence or two. So I'm going to go over some techniques we did in Illustrator at the start of class. Then it will switch to another video. So it's a good idea to follow along as I teach. So definitely pause the video and flip back and forth or use a second screen as necessary. So here is what I look at in the first few minutes. Maybe the editing and layers too. We'll see how it goes. So back in Illustrator, normally really it's a good idea to, set up a document as if you were going to send it to the laser cutter. And we did that more carefully first class. I'm just going to act like I do often and just come in here and I click this. And so because I didn't really pay attention and did that quick, you can see that you'll see in a minute that the units are in points, which really isn't a usable font, but it turned out that it was good that I did that because, yeah, there's the points. And it looks like I could switch it here, but I'm going to leave it in points because I want to show you something that works well in Illustrator if you don't pay attention to those details when you set up a document. So we are going to start with text. I know we used a lot of these other tools last class. I think we talked about the properties panel. It looks a little bit different right now because I don't have anything selected. So let's go ahead and click text. Again, it's a tool that has other tools underneath it. So if you hold down on that tool icon, you can see there's other ways to do text, and you are obviously free to experiment with those, but I'm just going to focus on regular text today. And when we click to start the text, it always gives us this Latin phrase, lorem ipsum. Looked up what it says, but feel free to do that. So now you can see that we have something selected. The properties panel is showing us various options and current settings for that text. And if you scroll down enough, you should see a character section. And so Myriad Pro is their default font. I'm just going to switch it to this one for now. You can see that it's pretty intuitive to change font size. There's 72 points. That is not the biggest. I was testing earlier the biggest, and I thought, okay, maybe it's 256. So I typed that in. It takes 256. Then I doubled that to 512. It's happy with that too. So I haven't actually attempted to find the highest font, but you can see I don't think you'll have issues with font size in this program. I'm going to switch back to 72 because even though, just for me teaching you, this will be a good one to look at. I am now going to zoom a little bit, and if you're using a mouse, holding down Alt and scrolling is a good way to zoom in. And the other thing I'm doing, you can see that I'm panning around. I do that by putting down on the scroll button. So there's my text. Now there's two ways to look at it. We can select it with the text tool, and that has us in text editing mode. If I want to move it around or do other object sort of things to it, I can switch to the selection tool. So the black arrow tool is called the selection tool, and it's basically for grabbing the entire object. So when I'm in the selection tool and move this around, it acts almost as if it were a shape. The other thing that's handy is if you get that selection tool to the corner, the icon changes to a double arrowed curve, and that would allow you to rotate. You can resize the text, And depending on what you're doing, you want to be careful of this because you can see it squishes and skews it. So if you do decide to resize this way and you want to keep the ratio, then you want to hold Shift. So if you hold down Shift when using this to resize, it'll maintain proportion. While we're over here, I want to show you that the properties up here, the transform properties up here, I find really useful. So number one, you can see that I rotated this to illustrate that it could rotate. If I want to get this to exactly 0, I could move around a little bit to try to get it there, but I'll never quite get there. You can see I'm pretty close. I'm at 359. But I can also just double click there, type 0, and then I know it's super accurate at no rotation, no horizontal rotation. Similarly, if I wanted it at a 90-degree angle, I could type in 90 and then it's sideways. If I wanted it the other way, I can click in -90 or even 270. So sometimes using the transform numbers are easier. A, you're going to get a higher accuracy. And B, maybe you can copy paste whatever. So, and we'll come back here soon when I go over more with developing a keychain. So there's some text. And it's still editable. So if I want to type something else, I can. Illustrator. And I can keep my text that way. I can switch to the selection tool to move it around. However, if we were to put this file, the laser cutter as is, nothing would happen because the laser cutter doesn't understand text. So text needs to be converted to an object. When we convert text to an object, it is no longer editable as text. We can do stuff with it, but in terms of like changing your font or your size, etc., well, the size isn't true, but changing your font or whether it's bold, things like that, once we convert it away from text, you don't have those options anymore. So before you do the next step, you want to make sure that you're happy with the text you chose. Okay, so in order to prepare this for a laser cutter, we use what's called, where are you? Might be up here. It's under here. No, there it is. Create outlines. Okay, so create outlines actually takes the text as letters and converts it to one shape for each letter, and it automatically groups it. Before I do that, we're going to flip over here to the layers panel, and you can see that right now I have 2 layers. Well, I have a layer, and what's inside of layer 1 is Illustrator, which is a text object. This is going to look different in a moment. So I'm going to select it, and I'm going to go to type, and I'm going to create outlines. Okay, so now what you see is it doesn't say Illustrator anymore, it's a group. And if I expand the group, you can see that each letter is represented. So it's almost like there's several little images. I'm trying to make this bigger so you can see. It's a compound path, technically. All right. And so since it's a group, you can still move it around together. You could still resize it with the handle in the corner. But we can't change the font. So if I take the text tool, and that you can already tell I can't select it. If I double click here, it goes into the group. So we're going to exit out of there. I can hit undo and it will go back to text. But what it is now is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 little objects. Technically compound. Okay, but you can think of them as objects. So I now want you to be aware of the difference between these two areas. So we know this is the selection tool. I think you're pretty familiar with those. This tool is called the direct selection tool. I often call it the white arrow. What it does is let you choose specific pieces of an object. So if I click the R, I've just selected. Same thing with the O, etc. I could select 3 of these if I wanted. I accidentally selected 4, but let's say I want the ILL. As long as I don't touch the W, I've selected the ILL. So that's handy. I want to show you a few things. So one thing about the selection tool with a letter, and let me zoom in a little further. So I've selected this, and all of these little square things are called anchors. If I put my mouse over the edge, it's called a path. These things can be manipulated individually. Now they're still all selected, so if I try to do something, the whole thing moves. I'm going to undo to get it exactly back in place. If I click one of these arrows, then it selects just that anchor. And you can even change it if you want. Okay. You can warp whatever shape that is. Anchors, when they're selected, they often show 2 handles. Sometimes you only see 1. And those handles further manipulate the shape. I'm not going to focus a lot of time on this right now because we're going to get to anchors and handles more when we use the pen tool. So if I wanted my A to look like this, I could make my A look like that. The other thing that's kind of cool I was playing with one day is if you select the inside edge of something, I could do this with the A too and delete it. You could remove that white space in your letters. That white space is actually called a counter, I think. Could be wrong. The other thing I want to point out, I'll select the A again. Some letters have these little images of targets. Okay, that's a really cool feature because you can just pull it like this and it changes the sharpness of that intersection. And I think you only see it when the angle's really sharp. You can see there's no little target here. I feel like I saw some. There'll definitely be some in the T. So let's say we only wanted, when I use this with the A, so I'll pick the A again. When I used it with the A, it switched both of them. If you only want to switch one, click it first. And then it only moves the one. Okay, so that's kind of a nice way to alter what your letters look like if you want to. So yes, you can alter what the letters look like. If I wanted to, I could even make an anchor here to have this look cut out. So you'll get to know that more. I don't need to say more about that, but I thought this was a good way to look at what the direct selection tool does. Maybe you don't want the S to go up like this. And you can, when you delete anchors, it deletes that section of the shape. So I can come and click keep clicking these anchors. And once I delete that section of anchors, it just trims that whole part off. You can also take them and move them around, as I showed before. So I don't know that you would do that very much with text. It's more helpful with other shapes. So we'll see more of that. Really, I for the most part, when we use text, it's all about the font choice. So yeah, but it was a cool investigation of seeing how the white arrow differs from the black arrow. So the black arrow is called your selection tool. White arrow is called the direct selection tool. And there's a lot you can do with it. It's a really good feature to know. We've also had a little glimpse at layers here. Right now, because they're grouped, if I select a letter, it selects the whole thing. If I click this group, if I select the group, I can come here and ungroup. And now when I select a letter, it'll select that individual letter because I've taken away the grouping. Grouping and ungrouping set of letters, it just varies depending on what you're doing. So I don't think you need to stress out about it majorly when it comes to preparing stuff for the laser cutter. And so in terms of the laser cutter, the biggest thing when it comes to text is that it has to be converted to outlines. And that was up here. So we have text, create outlines. So that's the one thing you really need to remember when it comes to text and laser. You got to do that, convert to outline. The other stuff I was playing with was just an opportunity to show you the difference between the selection tool and the direct selection tool. I'm going to flip back and see if there was anything else. So we looked at properties and size. We didn't look at mirrors. Let me show you mirroring. And this works for objects as well. So if you select something, back in the properties panel, I already showed you, changing the width and height. But there's also these two icons that are super helpful. You can mirror something, and you can either mirror it horizontally, or you could mirror it vertically. Why would we need that? Well, it actually does come in handy. Let me undo those changes. And I'm going to go back. So even though these now are separate entities, I can still perform the same thing on all of them by selecting all of them with my arrow tool. And if I mirror this, it flips the text backwards. And if I mirror it vertically, it turns it upside down. And you will need these sometimes. I'll explain more in class. So those are the mirror tools. Works with any kind of object that's selected. Let me see what else is on our list. I kind of think that's the only thing I did. We've done a little editing. I've shown you the layers panel, and we'll do more specifics with that. I can't remember if I showed you the trick I wanted to show you. So I'm going to do it now. Number one, this chain icon, if you make a change to the width or the height, the other axis will change to maintain the proportion that we have between width and height. So let's say I actually want this word to be 2 inches wide. Even though this is in points, I'm able to write 2IN. So I can type in the measurement I want it to be measured in, and it does the conversion for me. So it turns out that 2 inches is the same as 144 points, and you can see that height has adapted itself to maintain that proportion. If I didn't have that on and changed one of these, so let's say I'm thinking I want this to be 2 centimeters high, I can type in 2cm. And you can do that with or without a space. So when I do that, it just got 2 centimeters high, but it didn't maintain proportion because I turned this off. So I'm going to undo that. I recommend keeping that on unless you really know you don't need it. But so that last tidbit was, yes, you can enter anything you want. I can type in 25 millimeters, and it will automatically size itself to that. And again, I did it proportionally because this was on. So those are the things I went through at the beginning of class to get you more familiar with Illustrator. The second video specifically starts creating a keychain that will finish next week, and if you want it cut out, you can certainly have it cut out. So look forward to seeing you next week, and enjoy your long weekend.